G'day there guys, welcome back to my shed. I'm BC. Back onto our tool and cutter grinder and the list of operations. And what did I find so far? Well, there's one true surface that I can see, that one there. It looks to be a machined and ground ring that's shrunk over the casting for the base. It's running reasonably true. The mating part is only touching in 3 spots, and it's only a thou out, and that could be scraped in, I suppose. But this base is a little bit horrible, so what I'm thinking about doing is starting off with the only correct part. That'd be this bit here, upside down on the mill table. Mill the material down either side with a fly cutter with a very, very light depth of cut, only about 2 thou. I'll have to take the little bit out in between the tongues here, and there's a lot of dressing up of burrs. It's a pretty horrible bloody piece at the moment. But if I mount that directly to the table with a T-bolt through the middle, that'll make this face as parallel as possible with that face. Now comes the tricky bit. This part here, I honestly don't know which way I'll mount it. I don't have a 4-jaw in the truck, and if I did, it would be bloody hard to hold it. You'd need a fairly big angle bracket. So I'm thinking of mounting it on the rotary table on an angle plate, get this running as true as I can, and then rotary mill it. That'll give me a flat face, and then I can use about a 10mm end cutting end mill to relieve the inside of it. So that'll be then true to the base. Sit the hole up on the milling table, milling cutter, side mill that face, and then that's true to the base, and I can hand relieve a little bit on the inside. Now, so far a lot of this can be done on the horizontal borer. I've got a facing head that I could do all of these parts on, but the borer's not running. So I could do a 5-minute hodgepodge, quick wiring job, get the borer up and running, do this work, or I can do this on the rotary table. It's sort of flip the coin, which way do you bloody go? But that would be fairly easy to face off and relieve. And here comes the tricky bit. Old Mr. Workhead. None of it is true. And I'll see if I can show you the quality problem that we have. We should be able to tune in on that. You can see the actual quality of the face is awful. It's just thrown up on a jig, one quick facing cut and then thrown out. So what I'll do with the workhead is mount that part in the vise. It's 3 Morse taper. And luckily I have a 3 Morse taper finishing reamer. So if I shove that into the 3 Morse taper and use this bit to indicate the head is true, both longitudinally and laterally on the milling table, I'll then have the workhead in a situation that I can machine that to be a true face, set it up on the vise and put a true face on the top there. I don't like bodies that are just left as their rough cast. It means that they're very, very hard to hold. But that means the index will then be on a true part. I'll be able to mount that on the indexer and rotary table, on the index on the rotary table, and then mill around that as well. So there's a lot of rotary table milling to get to the job that the bloody borer would do very easily. So which way do we go? Anyway, one of my good viewers told me that there is a graduated scale under the end of the table. And as he said, the only thing is that low, you've got to be a hobbit or a bloody dwarf to read it. He says he's got 3 bolts that clamp his table. I can only find 2 socketed cap screws diagonally opposite. So far, look reasonably impressed. one thought I had, a bit of a brain fart, to get a bit more rigidity in the grinding head. It's an awful big cantilevered design, and I've been unable to find out what the parent grinder is. What was it designed from? Something in Europe, I think, but there's not a lot of rigidity in this rise and fall column here, just with a plastic knurled nut on the side, or bolt head rather, pushing on a gib. You know, that's a bloody Heath Robinson affair. So I'm thinking of putting a strut from the lower nut on the swivel point of the wheel head and run a strut down to the base. I think that would improve it out of sight. I had to do a similar thing on the horizontal borer years ago. I was fly cutting on the side of a round piece and it finished up flying over my shoulder. Being just Durabar, it wasn't touching on sufficient points to rigidly hold it on the table. So I just drilled and tapped the hole and I put a strut back to the table and everything came good. So that's where we're up to. Good part about this is I can progress any part and then go to the borer if I want to. And they're all fiddly but reasonable setups. So I'll have a bit of a think overnight and bring you back when I decide which way I'm going to go. Bye for now. G'day guys, back again, trying to set up the base to machine the underside. There's just a little bit of a wobble in it, and I can see why it's not so easy. The reliefs next to the cast-in key have been expanded out with an angle grinder and a cut-off wheel. Oh God, it makes me feel like such a good machinist. Anyway, to try and align the casting roughly in the direction of the table, the only real reference I've got, having to get a bit of clearance for the retaining nut here, are a couple of bits of 14mm bar and a couple of parallels indicate off that, and I've got it roughly in the direction of travel. As I said, it's been really relieved. I can't use that key for any sort of reference. I may later, once I've got the base flat, try and machine that as parallel with the bolt holes as I possibly can. The bolt holes now being the only reference, and 2 pieces of bar put in there. Just as an aside, I'll be using a little fly cutter because I'm only after taking a thou at a time. And it's part of a little set of American-made fly cutters that I bought years and years ago at a cheap enough price. Surprisingly, with a terrible milled finish left on it. But they are very, very good just for whisking a thou or two off and trying to get things close again, which is what we're doing at the moment. Anyway, I'll break this down. I'll check to see the highs and lows on this surface, mount the fly cutter and bring it back, and we're about to take a thou too. Okay guys, well, I'm quite surprised. It's in fairly good shape, besides being angle ground from end to end or from centre hole to centre hole. It rises about 2.5 thou on that end, and side to side there's less than a thou in it, so I'm going to call that good enough. Now I've got to avoid the nut in the middle, so I'll bring the indicator out past it. You can see that's about 2.5 thou end to end. I will skim it because the object of this exercise is to get this as close to true as I can possibly get it. The more error you subtract from the little parts around the job, the better off the overall job will be. So I'll mount the fly cutter up, get a scratching and bring you back in as we make a few little chips. As I said, I like these high-speed fly cutters because there's almost no cutting force. Okay guys, this is the last little bit of cleaning up. I didn't give you the whole shot of doing this because it's a bit of a clacker valve moment. I'm only taking 0.03 millimeters at a time because it's only clamped with one through bolt, and I'm trying to get the whole lot to finish up. The other side finished up okay except for a little bit on that end, only about 10 millimeters, and that's very, very close. Also, I found that the fly cutter wasn't cutting its best with the light depth of cut, and I had to go over it with a hone to bring it back up to a sharp edge. But I'll see if I can bring it along now for the last 30 or 40 mils. Not real exciting fare, especially for the seasoned machinists. And you can see this side just didn't clean up with that last little bit. Now I've got to go across the middle. There's a little pad where the drive key is. Okay. Yes, it's just taking a little bit off there as well. Woohoo, that bit's done. Now we've just got this out a bit here to clean up. Boy, this is cramped around the machine today. Okay. I'll just run over that with a slipstone. Make sure there's no little hair sticking up. I do have one perceived problem. As I said earlier, one hairy arse bloody machinist has run along just outside the locating key with a bloody cut-off wheel. And these are barrel shaped, not parallel. And there's not much I can do, because if I straighten up the sides of these, they could then become narrower than the hold down bolt, and I won't get it any straighter. But ultimately that could lead to an error of 1 degree on the face angle of the cutter, and I don't think that really matters. So I now have the lower face as the reference and the base machined to suit that lower face. So we're starting to get this a little bit more like a realistically accurate bit of machine tool. Okay, bring you back out. You can see a bit more of the setup. So we'll take that out, deburr it, see what it's like, and then try and proceed with the next part. Bring you back when that happens. Bye. Now here you are off the machine. You can get to see a little bit of a better look at it, I think. No great whoopsie-doos there. The fly cutter leaves a reasonable finish. And if I can get it in frame, that's the sort of thing that we're up against. I don't know how well you can see that. but it's only contacting on a very small amount over there and a little bit here. It looks like it's been turned with a very, very smashed up high-speed steel tool and never corrected. So I'll be trying to machine that down, and I'm figuring out how. I think maybe on the rotary table with a bolt through the middle, if I can get a bolt up from under the rotary table, that should get that round. That presents me with a problem. I may finish up hand scraping that to suit the reference surface. But that I'm trying to avoid because I don't have decent scrapers, just the Eclipse Engineer scraper. I don't know how well that'll do the job. But one part done. Now we move on to the next. G'day there guys, just a bit more to show some progress. I did try to use the fly cutter, and if I can zoom you in on that, far enough, no, back out a little. Okay, there's a definite little shiny bit on the corner. This casting has an extremely hard skin and just chewed up that fly cutter. Although it did the other bit of cast iron work quite okay, that had already had the skin removed. So it's a bit of an easier clean up. I've taped up both ends of the work head to try and keep the cast iron dust out of the bearing areas. Although they are abrasive resistant, I don't know how they'll go with this cast iron dust. And by the way, the reason you have to be careful with cast iron is the skin is actually used as an abrasive. Many years ago, when I first came to Brisbane, I worked on turbochargers, and some of them were from the port tugs up at Gladstone, the big Elliott turbochargers, and they used the Australian bunker oil that was high in sulphur, and the turbine housings would just get completely choked up with the exhaust effluent, which was clinker, and the only thing we used to blast it out was cast iron, not dust, cast iron grit, probably about 1.5 mil in size. It would all be hard casting cast iron, and they did a terrific job of getting the clinker out. But I had to change over to a solid carbide end mill, and all I'm after is a reference face here that's been clocked true to that face underneath, and I had the 3 Morse taper finishing reamer in here, and I clocked the top of that, so that gave me a casting that's true to the bore. I'll clean that up, then when I roll it over 90 degrees, that's up against the fixed jaw and up against the cast surface, and I can machine this top piece and hopefully get that as close as I can to being parallel to the bore, which I feel is fairly important in any machine tool like this. So I'll bring you back when I'm doing a bit more at the top, but it's a bloody shame for poor old fly cutter. Couldn't handle the pace. Okay guys, it's pretty hard to get a good look at what's going on. I'm absolutely cramped up here. I haven't taken all of my crap to the tip. So I'm trying to work around all of that. The wet weather's just stopped me. That's the next face that I'm going to machine. And I'm just trying to get these a little bit closer to parallel to the bore. You can see where the indexer arm that sits over the top has been wearing the paint away. Well, how can you get something accurate if you're just clamping up to a painted surface? I've also installed some newspaper because that threaded hole goes right through to the spindle, and I'll be extending the masking tape a bit further around. Here's my DTI set up on the shaft of the Morse taper reamer, and all I'm doing is knocking this around with my copper hammer until I get that shank as close as horizontal as I can, and then that surface should be machined parallel to the shank, I hope. It seems to have come up reasonably good like this before. And all I'm doing is improving on the junk to come out of the factory. This machine is a mixture of really good parts and not so really good parts. But anyway, I'll try and make it just a few thou better. Back with the next shot. Well, here's a bit of a surprise. If this is the export quality machine and you cast it that close to being flat and true, why the hell would you cover it with 3mm of bog and paint over the bloody thing? I just can't understand what their reasoning is. Look, that's only 2 thou off being perfectly flat and true to the spindle. It makes it a very good reference surface for the indexing arm. So why they wouldn't use it? But look, I'm not part of their politics. That's just the way they do business, I suppose. Anyway, this part of it doesn't seem to be as hard as the rest. It just machined off quite well. But I'll continue on. No use changing the end mill for the fly cutter. But I should have this ready to take off here. I'm considering whether to use the rotary table for the rested round surfaces or do a quick resurrection on the horizontal borer. And I think a horizontal borer resurrection will be the winner because some of the other bits are just too bloody hard to fixture for the mill. And I don't have a facing head. But anyway, I'll continue with this and bring you back when it's another exciting episode. G'day there, guys. Back again. This face did clean up, just 4 thou deeper than the last picture. I don't know why the hell the factory didn't do it. It makes it a much better idea than clamping a bloody indexing finger down on the bog and paint. Anyway, the workhead is now usable. I would like to machine the lower flange, but I've decided to pull this part of it to a close and move back to a temporary fix on the borer. It's just too valuable a machine. I'm looking at setting up to machine that face there and that face, and I don't have a facing head. Setting up on a lathe means changing over a chuck, which means trying to get my crane in there, and angle plates, and that would be another disaster. And I've got a few other faces on attachments that need to be faced off. So the borer is getting more and more valuable because it does such a nice job and it does it so easily. For instance, to do this face, I'll just be able to mount that on top of the swivel base, put that on the table of the borer and just face that out. That makes it dead easy. Then clamp that down to the table and face that off. Like, how much easier is that? Clamp that to an angle plate and then face the inner ring off. It's just so much easier than setting up on a mill without a facing head or on a lathe where I don't have a decent angle plate. I've only got the slots in the front of the full jaw chuck, and yeah, the fixturing just wouldn't be good. So the easy one is pull this to a close, move over, do a bit of work on the borer, get that running again. Love that old machine. It's just so easy to clamp anything anywhere on the table. Not fast, but it does the job. That's the important thing. Okay, look, you can make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. It just takes many, many man hours. But also I'll be able to use the borer to do some facing work on the Clarkson. I think it's about time I brought all of my machine tools up to par. So please like and subscribe, and I'll bring you back for the next exciting episode. Bye for now.